All right, 1, 2, 3.
Huckfin. It's everyone's favorite book to either worship or hate. Now, whether you think this book is white guilt absolving propaganda, or the epitome of black pride and liberation, whatever you think about the controversy surrounding Mark Twain's magnum opus, one thing is certain, and that is the escape motif that permeates throughout the book. Escape is defined as to break free from confinement or control, and Huck Finn, our young protagonist, does just that. Whether it be from civilization, domestic abuse, blood feuds, or fraud, it appears that every major plot arc within the book moves along with this 12-year-old boy poking it. So let's take a look at Huck's first escape. We'll be going through this chronologically, so this sets us at the very beginning of the story, under the house of Miss Watson and the Widow Douglas. Now, just to talk about Huck a little bit, to begin with, he's a young kid, his father has abandoned him, his mom's presumably dead, and he has currently a heapload of treasure that is under the jurisdiction of Judge Thatcher that he got from the adventures of the previous book. Now, the first escape within Chapter 1, where Huck leaves the window of Miss Douglas's home to go adventuring with Tom Sawyer and the band of robbers, symbolizes an escape from responsibility and societal norms and expectations. Huck does this continuously throughout the story, and he time and time again shows his willingness to flout societal rules, which he finds both confining and arbitrary. And at the same time, the escape from the window shows Huck's childlike nature. At the beginning of the book, and really onward, since the maturity of Huck stays relatively static, he remains a young kid who wants to enjoy himself while simultaneously avoiding pain and confrontation. In the make-believe robber stories, it's revealed that Huck is a no-imagination kind of guy who gets tired of playing pretend pretty easily. This will come into play later on when Huck takes up the role of an outsider view in the institution of slavery and some sort of pseudo-moral authority. Skip 2 chapters later, and Huck is once again under the custody of his incompetent and abusive father. Upon finding distinctive footsteps in the snow that herald his return, Huck immediately goes to Judge Thatcher to give up all his money to prevent his dad from taking custody over it, as well as consulting Jim for some superstitious advice from a hairball. Now, Huck doesn't really try to escape in this instance, instead settling for reducing the amount of damage his dad could do to his life. Upon his dad essentially kidnapping him to the woods, Huck tries to saw his way out, being trapped in the cabin for days, and he seeing himself potentially trapped until he starved to death. Now, this wasn't the way Huck ultimately escaped from his father, but this attempt clearly shows Huck's versatility and pragmatism in contrast to Tom's ideas, which come up later in the book. The faking of his own death, followed by canoeing down to Jackson Island, really marks the beginning of Huck Finn's adventures. The way he does this is actually quite interesting. He kills a pig, smashes in the cabin door with an axe, bleeds said pig all over the floor before leaving some hair on the blade before running off. Now, this escape was especially first in the sense that it wasn't an escape for personal convenience and rejection of civilization in some childish search for fun, rather a more primal urge to avoid physical pain, avoid fear for his own life, and to gain some basic attempt to retain some level of personal autonomy. This is a part of the story where Jim becomes a focal point of the narrative, more than just an introductory piece of scenery. The way Jim is introduced and continues to be portrayed in the story is a source of great old controversy, but the interaction between today's topic, but it appears that Mark Twain allows Huck's desire to escape to override Jim's desire to escape. Jim's decision, or rather lack of decision-making, in following Huck down the river further into slave territory rather than across the river into freedom, makes a compelling argument for an idea that Jim's struggle to escape was not really taken seriously in Huck Finn and Mark Twain, which is especially highlighted by the fact that he was sidelined during the Ranger Fields and the Duke and the Dolphins. By sticking him on a boat somewhere and forgetting about him, Mark's intentions of political commentary about the morality of slavery was somewhat undermined. Even still, some arguments that Huck Finn was a great abolitionist book needs to take a look at a timeline, because we have to understand here that Huck Finn was published 20 years after abolition. Now, after the two of them left down south for some tomfoolery and shenanigans, the escape from both the Ranger Fields and the Duke and the Dolphin have essentially less literary value or symbolism than the first three prominent examples. In these cases, Huck escapes the deadly blood feud by simply just walking away with Jim. The previous themes of rejection of society, rejection of personal pain, don't really apply in these instances, and it appears that these movements were more of plot necessity than any sort of symbolic value. With Jim captured, the motif appears once again, except with the inclusion of Tom Sawyer. The deference and responsibility of Huck to his affluent friend somewhat detracts from Mark Twain's overall message, where the moral authority and protagonist of the story becomes downgraded to a sidekick, and his black sidekick becomes downgraded to a stereotyped plot device, object to be saved. Now that we're on the end of the book, the refusal of Huck to become adopted by Aunt Sally and Polly shows a final sense of escape, or rejection of civilization, significantly different to the previous examples because instead of running away from fear and pain, he's actually running towards freedom and hope as he hopes to run off with Tom and explore Missouri River and become a free person again. So has this divide of escape being something as a tool for optimistic hope rather than a response to pessimistic reality. The human drive for escape and escapism is nearly universal. When you put your hand on a hot stove, it's natural to take your dumb hand off. Avoidance of pain, responsibility, or quite simply to take a break from our dreary, existentially meaningless existence. Escape is in all of us, and Huck makes sure to express it loud and express it often. So yeah, keep on running, Huck.